Hello everybody, my name is Bill and this is the channel Rest to Resurrection. In one of my last videos when we were pulling the seat out of this CJ2A, I mentioned that the gas gauge didn't work, and I mentioned that it was obvious why, because it wasn't hooked up to the sending unit. So before I put the seat back in, I wanted to find out, does the sending unit actually work? So in this episode, or in this video, we're going to pull the sending unit out. Then we're going to test it. I also mentioned that I thought I had a new fuel gauge in my box of stuff that I got when I bought the Jeep. And in fact, I do have one. It's a pretty close replica. The one that's in there right now is pretty crusty. So I think even if the one that's in there does work, I'm going to replace it with this one anyway, because this one's much better looking. So I want to get the sending unit out. We're going to test the sending unit. And then we're going to test the gauge and the sending unit together to make sure that when it is full, it shows full. When it's empty, it shows empty. And then in a future video, I'm going to replace that, that fuel gauge in the dash and then wire it up back to the tank. So let's go ahead and do some tests and just see if all of this stuff works the way it's supposed to. So now that we've got the sending unit out of the tank, we're going to use the multimeter and we're going to use the ohms setting to check resistance on this to see if this is actually even working. Now, I've stated many times from the beginning of this channel that I am not a mechanic, I'm not an expert, and that in fact this whole channel is geared towards me learning new things. And so this is the first time that I've done this. Now, with that said, I'm not doing this on my own. I did go and look this stuff up on YouTube, and in fact I'm using Kaiser Willys video on this. So we'll turn the multimeter on. It doesn't care which side is ground and which side is the power lead. But we are going to ground with the black side, and then we'll hit the positive on the power side, and that is up to 139.5 ohms of resistance. And then if I bring the float up, you can see that it is changing. So the fuller the tank, the less resistance. That's at 0.4. And then as the quantity of fuel goes down, then we get a higher ohms reading. So this gauge, or rather this sending unit, is working. So the next thing I need to do is to wire this up temporarily to the gauge, and then we'll test this again, and if it all works right, then we should see the gauge actually move as I move the float. Now, according to the Kaiser Willys video, you can test all this stuff with a simple 9-volt battery. So you need a hot and a ground. I'm just going to paint this one black for ground because they're both red wires. So if we take this first one and we hook it up to the ground, the hot side of the 9-volt. I know this is not the best way, but I don't have any alligator clips. Alright, and then the ground side, And my painted black side will tape to the ground side of the 9-volt battery. Again, I don't have any alligator clips. And just to be double secure, we'll do something like this. All right. Then the other positive side, we hook to the positive side of the gauge. And if we were to hook this ground up to the feed side from the sending unit, we should get some movement, which we do. Go Kaiser Willys. So that tells me the gauge is working as well. The next thing that it wants me to do is to hook up the sending stud in the center of the sending unit to the power side or the sending unit side of the gauge. So let's do that. Okay, and the other side to the sending unit side of the gauge. Okay, and then it wants the negative lead over here. Okay, so there's those two, and then the other one has to be grounded to the case. And then I have to hook the ground wire up. So I'm going to just use a flathead nut and bolt and come in from the top or the bottom. Okay, so we're all hooked up. Now I have to get a power source. In order to calibrate the sending unit to the gauge, we have to power it up. So I'm going to run the ground from the sending unit to the gauge and then to the battery. And I've marked these with black stripes so that you know that I'm using the ground. Probably would have been easier just to get some black wire, but this is the way this is right now. Okay. Okay, so I have the sending unit from the sending side of the sending unit to the receiving side of the sending unit on the gauge, and then the negative goes to the ground, and then I need to do the same thing over here and power this up on the power side. And if I did any of this right, we'll take it over to the battery in the Jeep, and this should work. So I'm going to take my pretend ground, I'm going to stuff it down inside the negative, and use a screwdriver to secure it. And then the positive side, we're going to run down to the positive terminal on the battery. And you can see we're getting motion. If I take the gauge, or the sending unit, and move the sending unit, you can see that gauge rising. It's at full, and it says full. And if I lower this, and at empty, it says empty. So what it's telling me is the gauge and the sending units are calibrated to one another, and they both work. Now that we know all of this is functioning correctly, let's disassemble it. And then I am going to put the sending unit back into the Jeep, knowing that I can put the seat back in as soon as the seat is upholstered. But before I do that, I'll have to run some wires, but I'll worry about that when the seat goes back in. Okay, there's the sending unit. All right, let's get that sending unit put back in. This thing is hollow, so that means it's not leaking, and it is floating as it should. That was a completely different type of video for me, something that I've never done before, so that's why I enjoy doing this channel and doing this stuff, because I get to learn so many new things. All right, so if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Guys, I really appreciate you being here. I love you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.